Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of In the Growth Space. Got a great one for you here today. You know, on this podcast, we talk about growth from a number of different angles, and today is no difference. We're gonna talk about resilience today, and we're gonna talk about how we need resilience and we need grit as leaders. And today's guest is a friend of mine, Paul Gustavson. And just to give you a little bit of a background, Paul and I were on a panel together at the John Maxwell Live to Lead event a number of years back. And we just hit it off. He's got such a passion for leadership and also company culture. He's written several books, and we're going to talk about the subject of his most recent book that's called Face the Mountain. So before we talk a little bit about that book, I want to tell you a little bit about Paul himself, because Paul is a fantastic leader himself, and he's very humble. He doesn't talk about himself a whole lot, but Paul is a tech industry leader, and he's got a passion for innovation and the outdoors. He is the co-founder and the chief technology officer of SimVentions, which was established in 2000. Now, SimVentions is a company that supports today's military and the decision makers with innovative engineering solutions and services. The Virginia Chamber and Inc. magazine have recognized SimVentions as one of the best places to work. Now, as the CTO, Paul fosters innovation. He contributes to the company's strategic vision. He leads the independent R&D efforts. He provides technical expertise, and he participates in industry standards development. Paul is also the author of a number of books. The one that we're going to talk about today is called Face the Mountain. He's also the author of Imagine, Breaking Average, Speech Blueprint, and Leaders Press On, and the co-host of the Breaking Average podcast. He is an active member of the simulation community, and beyond his work in technology and leadership, Paul mentors others through his books, through speaking, and through coaching, and he also leads the Thought Leader Jedis, which is a group that's committed to growth and leadership. So the book that we're going to talk about today is all about resilience. He's got a great story that kicks this book off in the book called Face the Mountain. And I can't wait for you to hear this story and to get into the conversation that I have with Paul, because I think as leaders in the world that we live in, we all need to develop resilience. And it's something that isn't easy to develop because it takes effort. And so that's really why he encourages us all to face the mountain, face that mountain we're trying to climb, and get after it. So this is a great conversation that I have with Paul Gustavson. Let's go ahead and get into the conversation right now. Well, hey, Paul, man, it's so great to be here with you, have you here on the podcast, but more importantly, it's just great to connect and reconnect as friends as well.
David, it is great to be with you. We've spent some time together, although it's been a bit.
It's been a while.
So here we are in the virtual world connecting, but
yeah,
anytime. And you're in a great city, Pittsburgh, and
yeah.
I remember really launching. I was always kind of business minded, but I remember when we launched our business, going up to Carnegie Mellon University in May of 2000, spending some time with a guy named Randy Pausch.
Yes.
A few others there that really inspired me
a lot.
Lecture.
So, oh my gosh.
It was before his last lecture, but a few years before that. But it was good just to kind of hang out and get to know a few folks there at Carnegie Mellon. I was just impressed with that whole city. At that time it was called the Robot City because it wasn't just Randy Pausch and his building virtual worlds activity, but also some of the robotics stuff that we got a chance to look at. So that was really, really cool.
That's so cool. That's so cool. How did you get connected with him? I know that, you're in the technology space, but how did you get connected with Randy Pausch?
Yeah, great question. So I'm an avid reader, and I remember I read a book called Digital Illusion that was curated by a guy named Clark Dodsworth. And in that book, it's written, each of the chapters is written by somebody different.
Oh, wow.
So I'm on an airplane and I'm sitting next to a guy and his daughter, and we just started talking, and he goes, "Yeah, my name is Christopher Stapleton. Chris Stapleton is how he introduced himself, not the singer."
Not the singer. I was going to say,
Everybody's
wow,
like, "Whoa,
yeah,
dude,
neat.
you sat with,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, "Say what?" And he goes, "Yeah, my name is Christopher Stapleton." And I go, "Wait a minute." So we were just at an event. He's down from Florida, but he was flying up. And I said, "You were just at this conference?" Yeah. He said, "Well, I was there too." And he goes, and I said, "Wait a minute. You said Christopher Stapleton. Did you write a chapter in the book Digital Illusion?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I call out to my friend, my colleague Larry, sitting across the airplane. I said, "Hey, Larry, you got the book Digital Illusion?" He goes, "Oh, no, I packed it in my bag. It's underneath, you know."
Yeah.
And but it created a conversation, a lifelong relationship with him.
That's so cool.
So years later, I mean, he was working for at that time working for Universal Studios, and he had worked with Disney, and then he worked for University of Central Florida at the Institute for Simulation and Training, a bunch of different things. And so he had a lot of connections, and so he got invited by Randy to attend their building virtual worlds. Big final. So basically, they get art students and computer science students, kind of mix them in the same environment.
Oh, cool.
I think the other guy's name is Dan Bartel. Can't remember his name. He was in the arts department, and Randy was working computer science. And we got a chance to hang out with Randy for about 3 days.
Wow.
In addition to some of the robotic folks there, there were people from all over: Intel, U.S. Army.
Wow.
Disney. So we met some Epcot science folks there. That was
That's
pretty cool.
cool.
So built some relationships. And
That's neat.
I think for me, it was realizing these connections that we have, they mean something, you know.
Right.
Occasionally we'll just shake someone's hand and say hello, but there's something of value that they can give us and something of value that we can offer them. And that's what I learned from that one way back when.
That's so great. Well, and I guess, you know, taking it maybe even one step further, my curiosity is kind of getting me to ask the question, well, how did that then, that meeting with Randy, how did that like launch your business?
Yeah, so we had just started our company, SimVentions, with the tagline, "Imagine, Create, Explore, Discover."
Yeah.
And I remember driving, got up at dark 100, driving to Pittsburgh to make the first day there. And the ink was still wet on the business cards, essentially.
Really? Nice.
The first two people I met were two guys from Epcot Science, and they look at it and they go, "Wow, love your tagline. That's what we're all about. Imagine, create, explore, discover."
Yeah.
And so, and then of course, sitting down with a lot of the students,
Oh, yeah.
is, you know, the grad students and the under professionals, different folks,
Sure.
just getting a chance to hear and listen, and hearing about really resilience. That's always been sort of, and you know, obviously the book that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
That element of resilience, I think, is something that I find kind of the common denominator amongst leaders. Like, you got to have some resilience.
Absolutely.
You got to have some things that maybe other people don't believe in,
Yeah.
but you're willing to take that courage and that step forward. And it's really about not just the courage, but the resilience to carry on and continue.
Yeah, you know, so many times I think in business, I talk to a lot of emerging leaders, and you know, there's a lot to be said about being able to bounce back. You know, everybody has setbacks, everybody has challenges and difficulties, but being able to bounce back and to actually keep going on in spite of and in the face of those challenges, those obstacles, is so key to having a great leadership journey, I think. And you know, let's talk about the book, because you wrote a book called Face the Mountain, and I love the first story in the book because, quite honestly, it sucked me in. It's, you know, it's one of those stories that you know, you're kind of taking us along on a journey up a mountain, and you know, you're with a partner and you're climbing, and so. Talk a little bit about that story, maybe, and then maybe what led you to write the book in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So this story is still something that impacts me almost every day. So I really shouldn't be here, to be honest with you. There's multiple stories in my life. You go back and you're like, wow, gosh, you got lucky. And this was one of those you got lucky moments, right? So me and another guy early in the morning, we're looking at this thing. I'm looking at this thing all summer long. I'm working at a camp called Spring Canyon. I'm just a volunteer. There's a bunch of other folks that are staying there, and there's one guy that's an Air Force cadet, and he wants to climb it. I want to climb it. I said, well, let's do it. Let's work it together. So we decided to set off pretty early, break of dawn kind of thing, grab a quick bite, and then we're going to try to get back by lunch. We're going to try to break the record and do it. So we're both fit. We're both ready, and we go. So as we climb, it's a cold Colorado. You know, in the middle of the summer, it's still cold in the morning, so it's pretty cold. We get rolling. We're climbing, and just you know, you don't really sweat, but when you're climbing like that, you're sweating because when I say that, it's so dry out there that sweat just comes right off. Right. But we're climbing up. We get through a scree field, and then we get up to some trees and some rocks and other areas. We're like, okay, this is a little bit better. So we keep climbing, but we realize we can't climb behind each other. We have to climb parallel. Otherwise, we're kicking up stuff. So he takes a line, I take a line. His line is better. It gets to the ridge faster. I thought I was taking another line to get there. So he's ahead of me. He gets to this special spot on a place called Mount Princeton called The Hook. The Hook is just sitting under 13,000 feet. The mountain itself has a couple peaks on it, like 3 super tall peaks, all at 14,000. This is one of the lower peaks, but it's probably one of the tougher peaks. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful spot. So he gets up to The Hook first, signs the book, and then he turns around. By the time he's coming back down, I'm almost there. He says to me, "Hey, Paul, I signed the book, man. I'm ready to go, but I can wait for you if you want." And I said, "Hey, no way, man. You got it. You can get back by lunch. I won't be far behind you." Now, those were words that I would later think about a bit after, because now we're totally separated. Probably not the best thing to do climbing, personally. But I get up, take a look, sign the book, come back down, and I'm going to try to catch up with my partner as best I can. So I'm coming through, and I'm about, maybe halfway down the mountain, and I get back to the scree field. Same scree field we were on earlier. But things have changed a bit. So as I'm coming across, it's warmer. The ground is a little looser. And I'm like, didn't have a problem with this before, but wow, it feels so different now. And sure enough, I take one more lateral step to the right, and the whole ground just breaks free. And all of a sudden, I'm in a landslide.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
And I'm just like, my life flashes in front of me. I'm just like, what is going on? This can't be. I remember thinking that. This can't be. And I'm just clawing, trying to stop. Fortunately, I kept my feet down. Below me is a graveyard of rocks and fallen trees that have gone before us. Right? And I'm like, I'm gonna hit that bottom. I know what's gonna happen. But somehow, miraculously, about 50 feet along the way, I stop. I kind of come to a slow stop, and then I'm like, okay. And I just sit there for I don't know how long. It felt like 10 minutes, but it's probably only like a half a minute because I'm just waiting because there's still little rocks and big rocks coming down until I finally just hear the whistle of the wind in the trees not too far away. And I'm like, okay. And then I find a way to maneuver back down another 50 feet to get to the bottom. I'm alive.
Wow.
And I'm just banged up. I'm cut up. I'm bleeding all over the place.
Wow.
I look like an extra from a Rambo sequel. Didn't look too good.
Oh, man.
And my leg is like, the worst part was my left leg. I could still feel it right now as I'm talking to you. There's a little chunk of my quad gone.
Oh, my gosh.
Because I got ripped to shreds. Wow. But I somehow managed to hike back on all, both legs and get back to camp, go up into the lunchroom where we're at. And I can kind of smell the leftover food. I missed it. I didn't make lunch.
Oh, no.
And they were cleaning up, and they saw me, and they decided, well, we need to clean you up.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh.
So I was 17 when that happened, David.
Wow.
17 years old.
Wow.
And so that happened a long time ago, but it's just a reminder, every day is a gift,
Yeah, for
and I
sure.
tell the story in the book about the camp director comes to visit me afterwards. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Tom Hemingway, retired Marine, and phenomenal guy. And I would say he was my mentor for that summer, really a mentor for everybody that was there.
Wow.
And he hears my story and he says, wow, when you face that mountain today, you almost lost your life. You almost lost your life. But do you realize that every day is now a gift? And it made me ponder. And then he asked a question. He says, the question is, what are you going to do with that gift?
Yeah, that's good.
So that's how the book starts. And it's a powerful story, not just, I'm not trying to, I want to be humble on it. It was a powerful story to me, just his words, his advice. Again, I learned a lot from him. And in the years after, I kind of came across some more insights from him because he taught us a lot that summer. And one of them was the 3 C's. And then when I learned the story about how he got taught the 3 C's, I thought, wow, this is powerful. And so I reached out to the original author of that to see if I could share that bit of the story. So there's more to unpack on that. It's just a lot of fun. I just wanted to have fun writing this. I wanted to talk about this topic of, why did I write it? I wrote this book, Imagine, a couple years ago. That was the book I always wanted to write.
Yeah.
But I really feel like this is so God let me write that, but this is the book he wanted me to write.
He wanted you to write. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I thought I was going to it was just going to be on faith.
Yeah.
And so I wrote I had a bunch of leftover stuff from Imagine, is to kind of talk about this aspect of faith and our imagination. Because I think of faith and imagination, they're two sides of the same coin. You can't have faith without imagination. You can't have imagination without faith.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'll just write a short little book on this faith thing. And well, I wrote that a couple years ago, and I shared it with a few folks, and I said, well, this is good, but it's missing something. I go, what is it missing? Well, I want to know more story. And I realized, it's kind of like Les Brown, never tell a story without a point, never make a point without a story.
Yeah, right.
And then I had shared this story before about, climbing the hook.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, there's something there.
Yeah.
And so that's how it kind of, so it's basically two elements. They came together.
Right.
And part of it was the recognition that it's not faith by itself that's important. You got to have grit to go with it. Like the two of those have to be together. Right. And I think too many times we just kind of focus on the faith and we forget about the grit, right? About the doing, about the parts that we have to kind of step forward through and push through. So grit's a big part of it.
Man, yeah. And even as I think about your story and just thinking about, the grit part of it, it's the part where you have to do the work to climb the mountain, and because you wouldn't have been where you were had you not gotten to the top and then coming back down, and all of the things changed, and there's a lot of stuff that we could unpack even in that, just because as you come back down the mountain then and you get into that landslide, and then you kind of get all torn up, but thinking about how do you move on from that, and how do you like bounce back, and what, recognizing then that, wow, I could have died, and now I have to look at life differently. I have to look at life with a lens of gratitude, and it is a gift. So what am I going to do with it?
Yeah, it's a great point, because climbing the hook, that was hard. That to get there, that was really hard, and that took a lot of focus. Yeah. Once you get to your destination, at least in my case, when I got to the hook, I kind of relaxed. I can tell, I'll be honest with you. Sure. I got to the hook. Okay, cool. Now I'm just coming down the mountain. No big deal. I'm just going to try to get lunch. Yeah. And maybe my focus wasn't what it should have been like it was when it was going up. Yeah. And I didn't have, if I had my partner with me, and it's no fault of his, I told him to go. We had rope. We could have easily provided a safety net for each other to be able to climb down that scree field. Scree field is like a real sandy, it's rocks and gravel and all that. It would have been easy.
Sure.
But no, when you take your focus off and you that's when the danger is.
Yeah.
I tell folks, like, I mountain bike a lot. And I tell folks the worst time to be on a bike is when it's not moving.
That's true. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's when most of the bad falls really happen.
Right.
Is when you're not moving.
Right.
So sometimes you just got to keep the momentum going and stay focused on what you're working on.
Yeah.
And this is true of life and leadership, everything that we do.
Yeah.
We got to stay focused.
Well, and I guess, how did you take, or let me rephrase the question. What did you take from that experience that maybe you've used now in business? You've been in business for 25 years and, you've been successful. I'm sure like any business, if you've been in business for 25 years, you've had ups, you've had downs, and you've had to, bounce back, and you've had to, do a lot of different things that, required a lot of effort. So what were some of the things that you used from that story and from that experience?
Well, there's a lot there. Years later, so let me tell you kind of the end of the story. And I want folks, what I share here, I'm just giving you just a little bit. So there's a lot more in the book.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let me just tell you who I was like before that happened, and then who I was like right after that happened, and then kind of the transformation. And maybe that'll help answer that question.
Yeah.
So before that happened, I had aspirations to be a professional athlete. I had aspirations to join either the Air Force or the Naval Academy, or be Navy, go to the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy. I had all these aspirations. I even had an aspiration to build a business. But after that happened, I was like, even with Tom Hemingway's great advice, hey, every day's a gift. What are you going to do with it? I took more of a passive seat for a while. Okay. I was like, I was scared. I lived with more fear and doubt. Like, wow, okay, every day's a gift, so I better cherish it. I better be a little bit more careful. And that was the wrong approach. So when I played passive, I struggled for years. And I was going through a real hard point, and I share this story in another book. But my senior year, I'm thinking that's the end. I'm not going to finish. I'm studying computer engineering, and I'm struggling with it. As much as I loved and liked it, I'm struggling. Like, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. And so I sit down, have a glass of Coke with my girlfriend at that time, and there were some struggles in our relationship at that point. And she wanted to know what was going on. So she said, hey, Paul, you haven't been the same. What's going on? And finally, I just admitted to her, because you know how guys are. Sometimes we just don't want to share.
Yep.
And I said to her, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to finish school. I got, my teachers are just loading us up. It's just overwhelming to me, And she asked a question that turned everything around. She said, well, let me ask you, do you still have hope? She actually said it this way, but you still have hope, don't you? And when she asked that question, but you still have hope, don't you? There's something that just kind of lit up in the back of my mind. I'm like, yeah. It wasn't like quick, but I thought there and I pondered for a minute, and I'm like, holy cow, yes, I still do. I do have hope. Yeah. And from that, her just tapping into the hope element, that's a quotient that I think we all need to tap into.
Yeah, that's good.
I was able to kind of rise back up. It was like coming off that mountain and like, okay, Tom Hemingway, every day's a gift. Yeah. What are you going to do with it? Like, okay. And it turned on the switch again, David. It was just incredible. And the aspiration that I had to, of course, it was too late to do the Navy and the Air Force and all that. Sure. But I still had a life to live. And I'm like, you know what? I got to pursue this. And it was shortly after that, a song came out on the radio, or actually, this song was never on the radio, but the artist kind of intrigued me. His name was Charlie Peacock, and he had an album called The Secret of Time. And I grabbed that CD and I listened to it, and I don't know how many times I I wore it out. It was actually an album.
Oh,
I wore it out so thin you could hear the song on the other side. Right?
That's great. Yeah.
But the last song on that album is a song called Experience. And there's a line in there that says, you can only possess what you experience. Truth to be understood must be lived.
Yeah.
And I just love that line. And I found out years later, it came from A.W. Tozer.
Oh,
so
wow.
he had leveraged that line from A.W. Tozer and put it
Nice.
into a lyric.
Nice.
And it was just a reminder that knowledge is cool, but until it's applied knowledge that matters. So all this stuff that I knew about and learned about, really I had to take that bold step of courage to kind of go forward. And it reminded me of what Tom Hemingway taught us that summer, which I hadn't shared yet. I mentioned 3 C's, but I'll tell you what those were. He talked about well, I found out later how he got the story, and we can talk about that. But the 3 C's were, hey guys, the 3 C's that matter if you want to lead your life well, and if you want to create a legacy for others, it's about competence, getting good at what it is that, getting good at a skill, getting good at elements of what we do day in and day out, having courage, being able to step forward with, boldness, really. It's a choice. It's not a feeling.
Yeah.
Courage is a choice. Yeah. We got to choose to do that. And the third thing is compassion. That we need to show compassion for others. Those are the 3 C's. So competence, courage, and compassion. And so I started to apply that and continue to do that. I think it's really important. I think if we apply those 3 C's in our life, as parents, as people with dreams, right? You can't pursue a dream unless you have courage.
No doubt.
You won't have the competence at the beginning.
Yeah.
But you'll gain it if you step forward and you start learning and evaluate those experiences.
Man, that's so good, Paul. But, I think too oftentimes, we go through school and we think it's all about just our head knowledge, but it's something that you said just really like clicked for me, because it's not about head knowledge. It's really about taking that head knowledge and putting it into place or into play.
Yeah.
And then, and that takes courage. And in order to take a step, you have to have the courage. And sometimes you're going to take a step and you're going to fall down, but you got to get yourself back up. You got to pick yourself back up. And sometimes even have compassion on yourself, because we're not always going to get it right. And so I love those 3 C's, man. That's so good.
Yeah, and it ties for me, David. It ties, The Man in the Arena by Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes, I love that. Oh my gosh,
that's so powerful. And in there, if listeners and watchers aren't familiar with it, just Google it. Teddy Roosevelt, Man in the Arena. It's a segment of a speech that he gave in 1910 on his way to get his Nobel Peace Prize. And he actually won that prize a couple years earlier, but he didn't have a chance to go actually accept it. So he's going to accept that Nobel Peace Prize, and he gets invited to Sorbonne University in Paris. And he has it's a long speech. Citizen of the Republic is the name of the speech, but in the middle of that is the Man in the Arena speech. And he talks about 3 different types of people. He talks about the gladiator, which is you and me, right? We are in the fight. And we're going to get knocked down. We're going to slide down that mountain. We're going to get bloody and bruised, but we got to keep going. And he talks about the spectators who are watching, but he also talks about the critic. And the critic who is telling us that we're not worthy, that what are you doing? Like, who are you? Well, David, for a lot of those years, you know who the critic was? Me.
Yourself. Yeah.
I was the critic.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget a call. Paul Martinelli, and I'll share this. Yes. Shout out to him. I've called him. He's a mentor in my life. And this is years ago. I have this great question. I'm like, I can't wait to ask the question. But my lead in is simply this. It's like, hey, Paul, as leaders, we can be our own worst critic, and we can, And he stopped me before I got to the question. He says, wait a minute, you're your own worst critic? How does that serve you?
Sounds like Paul. Yeah, how's that working
I
for
don't,
you?
and it was a power moment, man. It was like, holy cow, you are so right.
Yeah, yeah,
And and that's why I wrote the book Imagine, right? Because I
yeah.
tell people your imagination is the most powerful muscle you have.
So good. Yes.
It's either going to lift you or limit you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's either going to lift you or limit you.
yeah.
So it's this great, powerful tool, but if it's not used right, it's going to put a lot of thoughts in your head. It's going to
Right.
create doubt, fear, disillusionment, discouragement, all those things.
Yeah,
And when we're our own worst critic,
yeah.
boy, our imagination is not tuned right.
No doubt.
And so
Yeah,
I've been really fascinated with this whole idea of imagination. We can talk about that.
yeah.
But when Paul shared that, like, how does that serve you?
Right,
It really kind of got me thinking about it. Like, no, it doesn't serve me at all. It
right,
doesn't.
right.
And so I started digging into the scriptures. I'm a person of faith, and like, you know what? There's all these affirmations. I put 31 in the book. Like affirmations, anybody, whether you're religious or not, you can start to apply to your life
Take 'em,
to
yeah.
kind of eat that critic.
Right.
I think there's a fourth person in that man in the arena speech that
Mm.
that he infers, but it's not necessarily mentioned, right? So we talked about the gladiator, that's
Mm-hmm.
you and me, the spectators, and sometimes that's what I was doing for a few years. I was just spectating.
Sitting
I didn't pursue, doing the things that I thought I was going to do when I was in high school because I was now kind of like skittish.
Mm-hmm.
So spectator, critic, but the fourth person is the mentor.
Mm.
The mentor, and I think Teddy himself is the mentor in this story. But
that's
for all of us, there's a season where we get to be a mentor to somebody else,
Yeah.
and so I think that's the ultimate call for us to be in the arena, to be the gladiator, but also to be like Tom Hemingway and be the mentor.
Oh man, I love that. That's so good. And it takes, as I think about the man in the arena and the spectator, so oftentimes, like you, we all have dreams. We all have something that we want to accomplish and we want to achieve. And if we stay in the spectator seat, we're not gonna get anything, and we're not gonna even come close to achieving our dreams. But if we have the courage to get out of our seat and get down there and be the gladiator and get in the arena, then we're going to start to, yes, we're going to get bloody. We're going to probably get hurt a little bit, but that's when we need the ability to, pick ourselves back up, and we need that mentor to come alongside us and to be able to help us to show the way. And man, I love that whole picture, because as you start talking about imagination, I always talk about, we think in pictures. And so the imagination, I took myself there in, the arena and thinking about all three people, and I think if our listeners are watching or even just listening, if you allow your mind to take you there, you can do that and allow yourself to see what what it looks like to just be the spectator. And, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get any spoils. You're not going to get any accolades. But if you actually jump out of the seat and get into the arena, that's when you can really achieve the dreams that you have for yourself.
Yeah, that's so true. I think sometimes when we become the spectator, we walk away with a little bit of regret, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, well, that was fun to watch, but that maybe I should have been in there. Maybe I should have. And it's not necessarily a comparison thing. I think I want to be really cautious here, because comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I'm not suggesting that, but just to realize, you know what, sometimes you got to just make the effort. You don't know until you try.
Right.
I love the right trio. I call them the right trio, right?
Yeah.
So you got Orville and Wilbur, but you also had a sister named Catherine, and nobody else could do it before them as far as flying, right? Man-machine flight. And that whole process is learning. They're falling and failing all the time, And they almost quit multiple times, except they had a coach in their life. Orville and Wilbur had a coach, and their coach was a life coach named Catherine Wright, their sister.
Wow.
She just wasn't back in Dayton, Ohio, manning the bike shop. She was there responding to basically through letters. Imagine if we had Facebook back then, right?
Yeah.
So they're getting word. She's getting word about, it's not going to happen, or maybe 50 years from now. Like 2 weeks later, after Wilbur wrote that letter that says, "I don't think we're going to do it. Maybe 50 years from now," she writes back and says, "No, this is a dream of yours. You've had it forever. You got to keep going. I believe in it.
That's great.
I know you believe in it.
Wow.
You guys keep going." And they did, and then boom. Man-machine flight.
Wow.
They changed history. And if it wasn't for Catherine, we wouldn't even know who the Wright brothers were.
That's amazing.
So,
and it's, it illustrates a couple of things. It illustrates the power of belief and even just borrowing somebody else's belief in us, which, so oftentimes we need. But it also illustrates just persistence as well, and the need for a coach, because having somebody in your life to be able to ask you the questions, but then also spur you on and push you. Man, it's so good. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the book, you talk a little bit about like the 5 levels of belief as well, or something about.
I do.
Yeah. If I talk a little bit about that, if you can.
Yeah. So as I was digging, it's really cool how things kind of unpack. First of all, if you're not a writer, I encourage you to write. If you are, I encourage you to continue, because I think writing is one of the secret tools of just getting awareness. Because as you write, you might have questions, you may not know the answers. And as you write, things start to open up for you. Your awareness becomes, it's the reticular activating system, right? So on the base of our brain, we have this system. It's like a radar system. And as you plant thoughts and ideas in there, you start to see it. So I'll give you an example. If I say, "Wow, man, wouldn't it be cool, David, if you had a dark blue pickup truck with black alloy wheels?" I mean, you never see those. That would be a really cool looking truck, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You're going to see that everywhere now.
Yep, exactly.
Right? Because your reticular activating system has just been activated.
Tuned into
You've identified something that you desire and want. So I say start with values, but values go with vision. And once you have that in play, then things start to open up for you, and then you're able to pursue it. So I think that's part of it. There's so much to this. I mean, so what happened for me is and I encourage everybody to write. What happened for me was, wow, Maslow was onto something.
Yeah.
Hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But how in the world is it tied to faith? So I started kind of contemplating, and I looked at all 5 levels of need, right? So are you familiar with Maslow's?
Yep.
And I'm like, wait a minute, faith drives needs. Start thinking about that. Like, wait a minute, our faith's, like you and I, we know we're going to sleep tonight. We know we've got a place to stay, right? Yeah. So level 1 is not necessarily something that we worry about. Yeah. But when COVID happened, everybody kind of dropped down a few levels, right? Yeah. So you had physical safety and psychology. The need for physical safety and psychological safety was more prominent than it was before, because, before you're aspiring for something higher, but now we're just trying to find toilet paper.
Right, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Things change a little bit, but there's this element of need that corresponds to faith. And so what I did, I'm going to try to pull up my little quick list here, because I think this is so key. So just bear with me.
Yeah, sure.
So Maslow says, psychological needs, right? Bottom. Safety needs next. Love and belonging. We all want love and belonging. That's the 3rd level of need. And then you get this esteem need, right? You kind of want status and recognition. Yeah. People want that. And then finally, the fifth level is self-actualization. Yeah. So I started looking at those, and I'll cut to the chase. What I found was that there's a direct correlation to faith and grit. Right? Yeah. So if you go back to psychological needs, which is the 1st level of the hierarchy of needs from Maslow, really what that's centered on is faith in the environment and the resources around us that sustain us. And we have that, most of us, right? Both of you and I are sitting in a chair.
Right.
That we trust.
Yeah.
We trust,
Sure.
right? That kind of gets us to safety needs, right? Faith in processes and systems, that they built that chair right, that they followed that. It was funny, a week ago, my wife and I were at an event, and they had these clear plastic chairs that looked like something out of a cartoon, like for Wonder Woman. And my wife said, why'd you say that? I said, because the invisible plane, I feel like I'm sitting in an invisible chair.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, my faith in that chair was not the same as the faith that I have in this chair right now.
Sure.
And my wife, her particular activating system kicked off on that one. Yeah. So every now and then she said, I saw your chair moving. You better be careful. And went back to Guatemala. I'm in Guatemala years earlier, and I tell her, I said, I'm just afraid of the Guatemala effect. And she goes, what's the Guatemala effect? And we were meeting with a bunch of pilots at a school. Now, in Guatemala, they call bus drivers pilots.
Oh, okay. Oh, man.
And we're meeting with them, and I'm sitting there, and we're teaching them Maxwell values and all that. And I squirm in my chair a little bit, and it's just one of those old plastic cheap chairs that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot, and it's old. And all of a sudden, it starts to like fold up on me, and it just implodes and implodes, and I'm on the ground, and everybody's jumping up, and they're trying to reach out. Hey, are you okay? And I get up, I just laugh, and then they finally are like, okay, we wanted to laugh too, and they're just laughing. But faith in that chair, right?
Yeah.
Faith in the process and systems, that's level 2. Faith in the people and the team around us, right? So when we talk about love and belonging as a need on Maslow's hierarchy, that ties with the faith in the people and the team around us. You got 5 kids, your wife, right? You got faith, right? And then that next level where we want esteem, that's our need, that's our want. Well, really, the parallel here is faith in self, in our abilities and the impact that we can make. When we have that, boy, we've got that esteem as well. So that's the benefit from that. And then that 5th one that seems so hard, but I think it's so important to recognize is faith in a transcendental power, right? So I told you earlier that I'm a person of faith, right? And maybe somebody doesn't necessarily aspire for that. Maybe not all the watchers and listeners have that. Sure. But I think we need to recognize that a lot of people do. And it's okay to have that, right? Because Maslow talks about that need of, wait a minute, there's self-actualization for me isn't this godlike, I'm the one. Yeah. I'm the goat. I'm the greatest of all time. No. It's recognizing that there is something beyond just all those other things that we talked about, something transcendental. That powers us, that guides us, that helps us get through whatever we got to get through. And that's where I talk about those 5. So,
man, it's so good, and I think every leader that's listening has to be able to go through those levels of belief, and to be able to make sure that they have those levels of belief in order to have some form of resilience, and to be able to bounce back from the inevitable. You talked about COVID earlier. I mean, that was one of the biggest leadership challenges I think we've seen in a century. To learn how to navigate in an environment that was totally uncertain and complex, and so we had to be able to navigate that. And so being able to have our beliefs solid and have that faith and have the ability to to kind of tap into that, I think is really one of the keys to resilience.
It really is, and I feel like I'm still unpacking a lot of this, what I just shared here, and certainly in the book. But I keep finding evidence of this. Like, we have faith exists for every single person that walks this planet. Yeah, that's what I believe, right? I mean, we have faith in the environment, the resources. Yep, it starts there. Sure. If we don't, then then we do get skittish. Then we do kind of like it limits us. Right. We become the spectators, or we become the critics, or we become, the worst scenario is realizing, you know what, is having that thought that maybe my life doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's not a position we want anybody to be in.
Right.
And so when we can start to kind of work through that, realizing, you know what, there's seasons in life, you know, I share about that in the book too, 4 seasons in life. And even in whatever season we're in, we're going to face some mountains.
Yeah.
The mountains are actually there to build us, to strengthen us. Yeah. And we got to face those mountains. And if we don't, then our faith weakens. Yeah. But our faith strengthens when we face the mountain.
Oh, man, it's so good, Paul. And I think there's so many good metaphors, you know, with that facing the mountain, because not only does it provide, you know, a challenge, but I mean, it takes strength, it takes ability, it takes effort to get to the top. And so facing those mountains, whatever it is in the leaders' lives that are listening, face them and don't just be a spectator. Don't just stay, you know, in the stands. Get into the arena, face the mountain, go get it. And I think that's such a powerful message, man. Paul, this has been so good, and I can't wait to get the book into the hands of those people who are listening. It just came out, if I'm not mistaken, right? It just, or not too long ago. Yeah,
it's pretty fresh. It's the ink's still
drying.
Boil a little bit.
I love it. Where do they get it? Where do they go to get it?
Yeah, so the easiest way to get it, and we're going to put it in other sources, but right now, today, you know, the gorilla in the business is Amazon.
Amazon, sure, yeah.
If you go to Amazon, you search for Face the Mountain, and use my name, you know, you'll probably land on it. I mean, cool. Certainly I can share a link with you if you want to put it in the in the show notes or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
we'll put it in the show notes for sure.
And if they also go to my website, they can learn more about it. If they go to breakingaverage.com,
love it.
breakingaverage.com, and they'll see some books. I've done a few, and just some discussion on it too.
Love it.
Some good additional resources to go with the book too for those that get it. So
awesome.
I want you to have it.
Yeah, awesome, Paul. Well, man, I'm so delighted to be able to share just this moment with you and hear about this book, hear about your experience. There are so many lessons that we talked about today, I think, that are really important for leaders of every level. And I hope that people will go get the book and learn about facing their mountain and learning resilience in their lives, because I truly think it is a skill that every leader needs to be able to have in their quiver, because we face a world that is, you know, increasingly uncertain and increasingly, you know, we're going to be faced with those challenges that come our way. Yeah. We've got to be able to bounce back from them.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I echo that 100%. And the realization is that I think everybody, most all of us, know somebody who's facing a mountain.
Yeah.
They're going through a challenge.
Yeah.
And so while the book is kind of a self-help maybe book for you individually, it's also intended for you to guide somebody else. You know, I think back again to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Hemingway. And I feel like that was his mission in life, is to help people face the mountain. And maybe that's the common mission that us as leaders need to have for other people. And, you know, and how can we do that? And so that's what I was trying to do, is just share some thoughts. You know, as powerful as imagination is, I think we also need to have, because there's outside forces that happen all the time, independent upon what's happening in between our ears with our imagination. And so how do we combat that? We need resilience. And when we have resilience, not only does it impact us and allow us to keep going and to get up no matter how bloody and scarred we are, but it allows us to change our world, the world around us. And you know, we can guide others with that too. So I'm excited. I'm glad to be on with you and be able to share some of those thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I want to encourage our listeners to go out and get the book. If you're not in a place where you can, you know, go online right now, the link will be in the show notes, and so go to the show notes, click on the link there and make sure you get the book. So good. I remember I read your other book, Imagine, and gosh, so good there as well. So I'm excited for people to check out this one for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate you, David.
Paul, thanks again for being here, man. Appreciate it a lot.
Go Steelers.
Right on.